All right, Algebra 1B students, welcome to part 2 of lesson 7.4, where we are now dividing things with exponents. We're going to start here with these two warm-up problems. These refresh your memory on a couple of things we've done earlier in this chapter that are going to be important for us today. So just as a reminder here in number 1, when we see 9 times x times y, all of that raised to the second power, remember that when we take a product of things, meaning multiple things multiplied together, and raise it to a power, really what we are doing is taking each one of those pieces and raising it to that power. So we take the 9 to the second, the x to the second, and the y to the second power. And we should know that 9 to the second really is 81. So I'm going to call that 81x to the second, y to the second. So there you go. There is number 1. Hopefully you remember the raising of a product to a power rule. Down here, number 2, we see an x on the top and a y on the bottom, both with negative exponents. So please realize that because it's an x on the top and a y on the bottom, we don't get to subtract the exponents like we did in our last video. But what we do get to do is rewrite these with positive exponents. So we should remember that our rule from earlier in chapter 7 says when we have something to a negative exponent in a fraction, to rewrite it as a positive exponent, really this becomes 1 over. That becomes 1 over x to the 8th. But in a fraction, we know that this just means going from the top of the fraction to the bottom. So I'm going to take the x to the negative 8th and move it to the bottom of the fraction with a positive 8. Exactly the same thing here with the y to the negative 4 power, but that's already on the bottom of the fraction, which means I'm going to take that and move it up to the top. So all I'm doing is taking the y to the negative 4th, switching that to the top with a positive exponent, and then taking the x to the negative 8th and moving that to the bottom with a positive exponent. Okay, so y to the 4th now over x to the 8th. You can see we just took these two things and flipped them over because they were both negative exponents. Hopefully those two refreshers are just review for you and you know them very well. A product to a power, and then negative exponents and going from the top of the fraction down to the bottom. All right? When you're ready, turn with me, please, to page 441, and we're going to look at one more rule for exponents before we are done with the beginning of this chapter. Okay? So here's an example that shows you this property. Now, instead of raising a product to a power, we're going to raise an entire quotient or an entire fraction to a power. So we can see your book introduces this with repeated multiplication, right there, repeated multiplication. We have x over y, or x divided by y, all of that to the third power. So we know that to the third power just means we have 3 of the same thing multiplied together, okay? But when we multiply fractions, we should know that multiplying fractions is just multiplying across the top and across the bottom. So this is x times x on the top of my fraction, y times y times y on the bottom of my fraction. Okay? So hopefully that step makes sense to you, just multiplying fractions across the top and across the bottom. We end up here with x times x times x, which we know is x to the third, and y times y, which we know is y to the third. So really, x over y, all that to the third power, is just x to the third over y to the third. Okay? And your book then tells you this suggests another property of exponents. This is our last one before our quiz. And here it is. When we raise a quotient to a power, a over b to the n power right here, that's the same as a to the n over b to the n. So all we're doing is taking the power and putting it on the top of the fraction and on the bottom. So we raise both the numerator and the denominator to that power and simplify. Okay? So here's a couple examples for you. This example here is very much like the one I just showed you on the top of the slide. All right? Here's an example with exponents that are fractions, a over b to the 1/2, which is just a to the 1/2 over b to the 1/2. And then here we have 3 over 5 to the third, so we raise the 3 to the third and get 27. We raise 5 to the third and we get 125. So our answer there is 27 over 125. Please add these things to your notes, to your notebook, somewhere written down on paper, and then we will look at what this is going to look like in your practice problem set. So here now we are asked to write the simplified form of this quotient z to the 2/3 over 5, all of that raised to the third power. Okay? Now, based on what we just looked at, and what we just wrote in our notes up above, we know that raising a fraction to a power is like raising each piece to the power itself. So I'm going to do z to the 2/3, and I'm going to raise that up to the third power. And then on the bottom, I have 5, which I'm going to raise up to the third power. Okay? Now, the easier part, obviously, is the denominator, the bottom of this fraction. 5 times 5 times 5. It's not 5 plus 5 plus 5, so it's not 15. 5 times 5 is 25, and so this 25 then times 5 is 125. All right? So we've got 4 options here, and we've already eliminated 2 of them. Hopefully you can see which ones this cannot be. It cannot be that, and it cannot be that, because those have 15 on the bottom in the denominator instead of 125. Okay? Now the top of the fraction is z to the 2/3 power raised to the third power. Okay? Hopefully you remember from section 7.3 that when we raise a power to another power, what do we get to do with the exponents? We multiply them. So this really is z to the 2/3 times 3. And now if I want to make this multiplication easier for myself, I'm going to turn that 3 into a fraction 3 over 1. Okay? Now, 2 times 3 across the top is going to give me 6. And then 3 times 1 on the bottom is going to give me 3. So this is z to the 6 over 3. Now hopefully you know that 6 divided by 3 is just 2. So my answer is letter B. Z to the second power over 125. That just comes from raising each of my pieces to the third power individually and dealing with each of them by themselves. Okay? Once you think you're comfortable with that, I'd like you to take a look at this got it question number 3 down here on the bottom of the screen. I want you to simplify 4 over x to the third to the second power. Okay, write that in the simplest form that you can, all positive exponents, which you should have anyway. And once you're comfortable with that, flip with me to the next page 442. I will go to the next slide. We'll look at one more, a little bit more complex example, and then we'll be ready for our practice problem set. So take a look down there at the got it number 3. Just letter A, 4 over x to the third to the second power. Pause the video. When you're comfortable, come back with me and we will go on. Okay, moving on then to raising a quotient to a negative exponent. Okay, negative exponent. Now, we know that raising something to a negative exponent flips it, right, from the top of the fraction to the bottom or from the bottom to the top. Now, like we saw in our warm-up problem, if we have both negatives on the top and bottom, we need to flip both. So the top becomes the bottom and the bottom becomes the top. All right? So 2 methods that I'm going to show you to do this. The first is to flip the fraction first. Okay, so 2x to the 6th power over y to the 4th to the negative third. Whenever you see a fraction to a negative exponent, you can just flip it right away. Just flip it. Okay, so I know that this is really y to the 4th over 2x to the 6th. Now all of this is not raised to the negative 3 power anymore. It's now raised to the third power. Okay? And then I'm going to continue on by simplifying now, getting rid of those parentheses, raising each piece to the third power. Okay? So now I'm going to use the rule that we just wrote down in our notes today. that says I can take my y to the fourth and raise that to the third power and put that over 2x to the sixth, that raised to the third power. All right? So that's what this equals. That's where I'm at now. Okay, I'm going to keep going down, keep simplifying. Please be following along and adding this to your notes with me if you're not already doing that. Now, if I have y to the fourth raised to the third power, remember that a power to another power means multiply those exponents. So I have y to the 12th on the top, 4 times by 3. And then on the bottom, now I'm raising a product to a power. So this is what we talked about in class on Friday, right, for a few of you. We need to raise the 2 to the third power and the x to the 6th to the third power, right? So this is 2 to the third power and x to the 6th to the third power, all right? And then last step here to finally just simplify this all down. I still have y to the 12th on the top. That didn't change at all. But now I know right here that 2 to the third is just 8. So I'm going to say that's 8. And then I know that x to the 6th raised up to the third means I get to multiply the 6 and the 3. And 6 times 3 is 18. So I have y to the 12th on the top and 8x to the 18th on the bottom. Okay, I'm done. That's method 1, where I flip the fraction and then simplify. Okay. Next, I'm going to do the other method, method 2, and hopefully at the end we end up at the same point with the same answer. So now I'm going to simplify first and then flip at the end. I know I'm still going to have to flip because I see this negative exponent here. All right, but I'm going to simplify it down first, put the negative 3 to each piece of my fraction, and then flip at the end. So what I'm going to start with is on the top, 2x to the 6th, raise all of that to the negative third. And then on the bottom, I'm going to do y to the 4th, raise that to the negative third. Okay? So there's step 1. I just put the negative 3 to each piece of my fraction, the top and the bottom, like our rule from today says I can. Now, the top of my fraction is where I'm raising a product to a power. So I know that I need to raise both pieces here, the 2 and the x to the 6th to that power. So I'm going to have 2 to the negative third times x to the 6th to the negative third. And now on the bottom, I can do this one right away, because I have y to the 4th to the negative third. And when I raise a power to another power, I know I get to multiply those. So 4 times negative 3, this is y to the negative 12th on the bottom. Okay? So now I'm going to simplify the top, and then at the end we should be able to flip, and we will be right there where we ended the last method. So I know that 2 to the negative third, I can't really simplify that yet until I get a positive exponent here. So I'm going to leave that alone. But I do know that x to the 6th to the negative third, I can do some multiplying of my exponents there because I am raising a power to a power. So this is 2 to the negative third times x to the negative 18th, and all of that is over y to the negative 12th. Okay? So now I have this as simplified as I can get it, but I need to rewrite this with all positive exponents, okay? And because every piece that I see, the 2, the x, and the y, all have negative exponents, I know that they all need to flip positions in my fraction. So anything that is on the top is going to go to the bottom, all right? Starting with my 2 to the negative third. But now, since I flipped it to the bottom, it's going to become 2 to the positive third, which we know is 8. The other piece that needs to come to the bottom is this x to the negative 18, which is now going to become x to the positive 18 because I flipped its position from the numerator to the denominator. And exactly the opposite for my y to the negative 12. That is going to move from the denominator to the numerator and become the y to the positive 12. Okay? So now we can see everything has positive exponents. The only extra thing that I'm going to do here is rewrite 2 to the third as 8, like we know it is. X to the 18th still on the bottom, and y to the 12th on the top. Alright, so there we go. Those two things are exactly identical, which is good. So our two methods both work. You can choose either one you want, the flipping first or the simplifying first. Flip first, simplify first, either one you want. I suggest that one, but if you like the simplify first, please feel free to use it. That's no problem at all. All right? If you have questions about either of those methods, please ask me tomorrow in class. And now I want you to take a look at got it number 4, where I'm asking you to raise this fraction here to the negative second power. Okay? So got it number 4, which you can find there on the top of page 442, if you're looking for it in your book. Once you've mastered that problem, using one of the two methods that we looked at on the last slide, you're ready for your practice problem set, which is right here. Okay? So once you've mastered that problem, you're all ready. That's all I have for you right now. Hopefully you have a great night.